We are back. Golenbock University. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and the professor is here with me. I am Sans co-host. We have Robert Denenberg, who is going to join us this evening, to continue the talk on Dynasty that we had on the last episode. He's taking care of his mom this evening, who's a little under the weather. And Alan Blumpkin had to have a timeout. He's had a rough week in the world of the internet. He had a cable problem. They changed the box that he had going. Peter Golenbock, our host, and they eliminated all of his treasured movies that were backup. He had all of his stuff on there, irreplaceable stuff. If he did replace it, it would have taken months and months of trying to piece together his movie collection and what have you.
He didn't have carbonite?
Nothing. Pardon me?
He didn't have carbonite?
I have no idea what he had, and I don't have any idea what the system is, but he was down in the dumps about that. He's also been on 3 shows on the network this week. He was on the Oakland A's show that I have going, past, present, future, and he gave a great dissertation on the 3 moves that the franchise made, what precipitated the Philadelphia move to Kansas City, and then again what precipitated the move to Oakland with Charlie Finley. And he's incredibly articulate. We also have, I don't know if you know, Hal Bach, Alan Blumpkin, and I do a show on the network. We call it Vintage Sports from Nedick's at the Old Garden. And we talk about stuff that isn't necessarily baseball. It always goes back to baseball, all of our first loves. But we've been talking about basketball and hockey a little bit. And so this is a formal invitation. We tape on Tuesday evenings. If you have a Tuesday evening free sometime, we'd love to have you as a guest on that show. And that's my formal invitation to you, sir.
Okay.
All right. And I was also, I save up questions in the back of my head that aren't necessarily topical. I want to know when the book, talking about the book, and we've talked about how Marty Appel opened the gates, and Bob Fischel, and they gave you access, and you did indeed get a contract to write Dynasty.
Amazingly enough, I did.
That was your first, obviously, your first book. What does getting a contract to write a book mean? Obviously, there's front money, this, that, and the other thing. But are they telling you that the book's going, that because of what they think, that the book will be successful and they'll put advertising dollars into it? Do the two go hand in hand?
No, nothing goes hand in hand. No,
okay.
that's not necessarily what they're telling you. And in this day and age, they're telling you even less. No, basically, what it told me was my first contract for Dynasty, they were going to give me $2,500. So
$2,500.
Yeah, $2,500 is what they handed me, and fortunately, it wasn't like today, where they give you a third on signing, a third on handing it in, and a third on publication. So if that had been the case, they would have given me 1/3 of $2,500. You know, it's amazing how they expect a history book to get written under those circumstances is always amazing, which is why, today I much prefer a book where I work with one other person, like Lenny Dykstra, like Kurt Angle, the wrestler.
Right.
Because instead of interviewing 50 people, which requires a lot of time, which requires a lot of travel, which is very expensive today. It wasn't when I first started out, but it is today. To do a book with one person basically requires you to interview somebody for between 25 and 30 hours, and you can, fairly well do that on the telephone. So it's
okay,
just
but
a lot
that
less
person,
expensive.
And I don't know anything about the wrestler Angle, whose book you're working
He
on.
won the Olympics. He won the Olympics, and he's in the WWE Hall of Fame. And he's got a wonderful story to tell. But the point is,
okay, that's the key. That's the key. You have to have one guy with an incredibly wonderful story to tell.
Without a doubt. No, that's right.
Because it all revolves around him.
Of course.
Okay.
So what was the question you were asking me? You were asking me about what I expected.
See, I thought they gave you enough money to travel around and see all these people. I mean, $2,500 could be that was more money in those days than it is now.
Don't forget when I went to visit Eno Slaughter in Roxborough, North Carolina, and this was in the summer of 1973. I stayed at a motel near his home, and I paid $9 for the night.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you have to put the money into perspective on some levels, but
right.
Having to spend your time.
Let me also back up since you asked me the question. I spent 6-7 months at Yankee Stadium, and I went through their voluminous archive. I mean, I must have gone through 100,000 articles that Bob Fischel had saved since God knew when. And what happened after that is I had all this material, and I had them in folders, and I had them all by player, that sort of thing. And not having written a book before, I sat down with all this material, and I very wisely discovered that you really can't write a book based on stuff that's already been written, because there's nothing new in it. There would be nothing new for somebody to read. So what I did is I called the fellow who gave me the $2,500, and I said to him, listen, Nick, I've spent all this time at Yankee Stadium. I have to go out and interview all of these players. And the Yankees have given me the addresses and telephone numbers. I need to get on the road. I need another $2,500.
Oh, okay, good.
If he had said no, my career would have been over. But he understood how much work I had put in, and saw, my eagerness to do this.
Well, he saw that you had the list and the phone numbers and addresses.
Yeah.
That the potential was there. If you were just going to go out and try to find these people, well, that's another thing.
Very often, with the other books I wrote, that's what I did. I mean, only 2 organizations have ever given me assistance, and one was the Yankees at that time. And believe me, if I had come 1 year later under George Steinbrenner, I would not have gotten any cooperation. And the other one was the Dallas Cowboys. I wrote a book called Cowboys Have Always Been My Heroes, and I went to Dallas and I sat down with the PR guy, and he was just marvelous. He said, I so am looking forward to your doing this book. I will give you the names, address, and telephone numbers of anybody you need to find.
See, that's a book I had no idea existed. I can't wait to read that.
Because it's tremendous.
You might have talked. You and I both attended that first Dallas Cowboy game when Meredith and
LeBaron, yep.
Right, from Stockton,
yep.
LeBaron.
That's right.
Kind of rotated in and out, and that was.
I think that was 1960. May have been 1960.
Right.
If not, yeah, I think so.
60 or 61.
Well, one or the other. But
one or the other.
The
and
fantastic
sometimes
thing
the winter sports go both years sometimes. So, but they came in and played the Giants at
Giants, right?
Yankees. And
LeBaron was the quarterback.
Pardon me?
LeBaron was the quarterback.
LeBaron and Don Meredith. And
right.
And what was appealing to me about that game is that the coach had been an assistant coach under
Steve,
a big guy.
Big Steve. Yes. The Green Bay coach was the offensive coach, and Landry was the defensive coach under the Giants head coach. Yeah,
right.
That's absolutely true. Yeah,
that was a hell of a coaching staff. And to top it off, I don't know if he was an official assistant coach when he still played, but Emlyn Tunnell was the most experienced, skillful defensive back coming in in those days. And
but of course, he was not going to become a coach because he was black.
Oh yeah, of course. God forbid.
Right.
And I don't know. I talked to so many people. I talked the other day to someone who did an interview with. She wrote a book. Arlene Howard wrote a book about.
Yes, I just finished reading it. Yeah, well, we can talk about that at length too. Oh yeah.
I'd like to because
stunning book.
You talk about people not getting jobs for the wrong reasons, and even this is 64, 65, 60. These are years so far after Jackie, civil rights movement and everything else. They still wouldn't give him a job. They would not give Ellie that.
We're jumping around here a little bit, but yes, Ellie Howard wanted to be the first black manager, and he should have been. He absolutely should have been. He was a wonderful, smart guy. He was the guy who kept Reggie Jackson and Billy Martin from killing each other. He could have been the disciplinarian had he needed to be a disciplinarian, but no. They would not give him that job, and Billy got fired 4 or 5 times, and he asked for the job every time.
They're bringing in people like Bill Verdon from outside of the organization.
Oh, I know. And also
you can't bring it.
And Ellie went to the Boston Red Sox, and Ellie wanted the job after Dick Williams got fired, and they wouldn't give it to him either.
Right.
And so the interesting thing, of course, was that Jackie Robinson died at age 53, and Ellie Howard died at age 51. And Arlene Howard
both from internalizing all that bullshit.
Yeah,
from
that's
living
right.
Life. That's all it's about.
The last line of that book is "Baseball killed my husband."
Oh.
Yep. Yeah. Now you want to go back to Dynasty with my contract?
Yeah.
More to the story.
I got to take a deep breath and just tell you how heavy that is in light of what we're exactly the same age and what we've seen in our lifetime. To see it full circle, where we have a leader of this country who could very easily take us back in so many ways to.
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. I'm much more positive about it than most, because there are a lot of forces to stop that from happening, including the ACLU, including the courts, including the Republicans in purple states, including protesters, including, Elizabeth Warren and who have you.
Right.
We'll see. So far, we have a lot of bluster.
Right.
And it's nasty. I mean, it really is nasty. You've got to read New York Magazine, David Remnick's article on the first 100 days of Trump. It's really chilling.
Was he talking how he's feeling cooped in, Trump, because he can't drive and he thought the job was going to be easier than this? And is that because there was an article that came out this week expressing his thoughts over those inane subjects?
Oh yeah, no. There's a lot of mention of his inanities in this particular article. David Remnick, who to me is one of the brilliant analysts of our day, I mean, I'm just crazy about what he has to say. Has written a beautiful article in the New Yorker. That's clearly
I'll look
worth
for that.
People reading.
I will definitely look for that. Let's get back to Dynasty and continue what you were saying.
All right. So I asked.
He gave you more money, right?
Yep. He gave me another $2,500, and I spent every penny of that tracking down ball players. I went to the coast to see Don Larson and Andy Carey and Johnny Lindell. I went to the Midwest where I saw Jerry Lumpy and Tom Sturdivant and Allie Reynolds. I went to New York and New Jersey where I saw Eddie Lopat and Phil Rizzuto and Vic Raschi, which was, seeing these guys every time to go in and talk to these people was just so pleasurable. Because don't forget, Raschi had retired somewhere around 1956 or 57. So this was now 1974. And nobody gave a damn about Vic Raschi. We didn't have ESPN, or we didn't have 24-hour sports. We didn't have 30 for 30. He was a guy who owned a liquor store in a little New York town in the middle of nowhere. And, fortunately, I had a letter from Mike Burke, who was the president of the Yankees,
from CBS,
which said that if this guy, should happen to call, please give him, please talk to him, please treat him well, which was fabulous because Raschi had been burned by the press. He had been traded, I think, to St. Louis late in his career. He had asked for a raise for George Weiss, who was just a son of a bitch. And Weiss, to show all the players that they better not get uppity just because they won 5 World Series in a row, traded the guy.
Yeah, why be uppity,
And Raschi, Reynolds, and Lopat, the three of them, and won them the 5, with Whitey Ford, had won them the 5 World Championships. And so it was interesting because Raschi said something like, ordinarily I don't talk to people. But since Mike Burke, says that you're okay, okay, I'll talk to you. And of course he was wonderful. I mean, they were all wonderful. Joe Page in a small town near Pittsburgh was just, spectacular. All these guys were just spectacular, every single one of them.
Where did you catch up with Andy Carey? Because he's from the town I live in, Alameda.
Yeah, well, that's where I caught up with him, in the town you live in.
Whoa.
He was living very well out in California.
Yeah, very cool. He passed a few years ago. I never got to...
They all did. I've got interviews with 75, former dead people. Astounding what I have.
The younger ones are done. Bobby Richardson.
Whitey Ford is left. Obviously the guys from '64 left. Boughton and Pepitone and Al Downing and those people are still alive. But those people, I couldn't believe how old Jim Boughton was. I was astounded. I think he's 80. Is he 75? Okay. Something like that. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyhow,
75.
You may be right. Because he's not that much older than I am. But when I went to see him in 1974,
he was still making comebacks.
He was that's a funny story. If I could sort of interrupt myself, because we had become close friends after that first interview, And I was working at the Bergen Record, and he called me up one day, and he said, "Listen, I'm going to be starting for the Atlanta Braves, and I'll pay for your ticket to come down and watch me pitch." And I did. And I went back to the Bergen Record, and I wrote a front page article in the Bergen Record on his comeback. Because he lived in Englewood, New Jersey, which is in Bergen County, so it was a perfect front page article. It was a hoot. It was an absolute hoot.
Man. That had yes, absolutely. This already 20 years removed from the Bulldog days.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I got another $2,500, and I went to see $2,500 worth of players, and I went back to Nick Dincheco, and I said, I still have to see Mantle, and I still have to see Whitey, and I still have to see this one, that one, the other one. Can you give me another $2,500? And he did. And back I went. Out I went. I went down to Atlanta, where Clete Boyer was. I went to Gainesville, Florida, where Roger Maris was, and Roger absolutely refused to talk.
Your distributor.
Yeah, that's what I went to his place, and it was funny because there in the shop were his two MVP trophies, these two tarnished little trophies sitting at the bottom of some very, very inexpensive case, which was kind of sad, I thought.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so Roger, didn't want to be quizzed about what happened to him with the Yankees because it was all so horrible. And so I went to Atlanta, where Clete Boyer had this redneck bar, really a country and western bar, sitting right outside of Atlanta.
Because you've alluded to the story, and you were waiting in the bar. It wasn't just some bar you were waiting in.
No. It was Clete Boyer's bar. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. That puts it together. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I thought he had you waiting in a...
Oh, no. He had me waiting in his bar. It was Clete Boyer's.
Oh, which is a little more comfortable
Glove.
than being waiting on...
No, it wasn't any more comfortable. I was sitting on a bar stool, just like any other bar stool. But Clete had said to me,
you were waiting for the owner of the bar as opposed to... I don't know.
Listen, when you're a reporter, you'll wait anywhere. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are when you're waiting. It really doesn't make any difference.
Right. A lot of reporting, I'll bet, is just that, waiting for things and to shape up.
Not a lot of it, but some of it. At any rate, Clete said, I'll meet you at 9:00 in the morning at my bar. So I got there at 10 of 9 because you always want to be a little early, and I sat at the bar. I think I ordered a Coke, sitting with 10 of the largest former high school football players you could ever imagine, who were downing whiskey and beer and God knows what, and talking to me about their high school careers. And if only I hadn't gotten hurt in my last game in high school, I would have been a pro football player, which is probably true. So at any rate, I'm sitting there with these guys, and 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock, and 12 o'clock, and I have lunch, and 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock, and I'm thinking to myself, gee whiz, and 5 o'clock, and 6 o'clock, and 7 o'clock, and 8 o'clock, and Clete shows up at 9 o'clock at night. I sat in that friggin' bar for 12 hours.
You miscommunicated.
But what are you going to do? I mean, what are you going to do? You've got one shot. You have exactly one shot to interview these people. And Clete had told me that the next day he was flying to Japan. So this was it. Do or die. And I sat there, and Clete walked in at 9 o'clock with Roger Maris. Exactly right. Yeah. And I went, oh, my goodness. So Roger and Clete and I sit down at a small table, at which point Roger says, at which point Clete says to the two of us, I've got to take care of a little business. You sit here and wait for me. So now I got a problem. Hi, Raj, how are you doing? How are you? He knew exactly who I was. He knew what I wanted. But you sit with Roger Maris, you're basically twiddling your thumbs because you don't want to say to him, would you talk to me? Because if he says no, the night is shot.
Right.
So he was a smart enough guy, after about 3 minutes of our, looking at each other cross-eyed, he says to me, "If you want to go outside, I will talk to you." And we went outside, and for the next hour and a half, he was stunning. He was so sensational. He told me every little thing he wanted to get off his chest about how the Yankees treated him, how terribly the Yankees had treated him.
He told you about the wrist, I'm sure, about him being hurt.
Yes, sliding into home plate and breaking his hand and having the Yankees take him to a doctor and have it x-rayed and not telling him that his hand was broken because Mickey was on the DL and they needed somebody to draw the fans. So Roger hit something like .230 that year because they didn't tell him he had a broken hand. And the other thing that happened, which was really awful, was that at the end of the 66 season, you remember the Yankees finished dead last. They were just awful. Roger said to Ralph Tyko, "I'm retiring." And Ralph Tyko said to Roger, "Do me a favor. Don't announce it. Wait for the spring, and we'll have a little, get-together for you to celebrate your retirement." So Roger figured, what the hell, what difference does it make? Fine. And 2 weeks later, Ralph Tyko traded Roger Maris to the St. Louis Cardinals for Charlie, what was Charlie's last name? Smith.
Is it Charlie Smith?
Charlie Smith. For Charlie Smith. Exactly.
Right.
For Charlie.
He later played for the Mets, as a matter of fact.
At some point. So anyhow, Roger.
Taking out Blumpkin's place tonight.
Roger is furious. Roger is just furious. How can you do this to me? On the other hand, he thought to himself, if after they announced I'm traded to the Cardinals, I quit, it's going to be bad old Roger all over again. So what did he do? He went to the St. Louis Cardinals and helped them win 2 pennants in 1967 and in 1968. Why this guy is not in the Hall of Fame right now, there are 2 people not in the Hall of Fame that just make me see red. And one is Roger and the other is Gil Hodges. Those are the 2 people who belong in the Hall of Fame, and it just drives me friggin' crazy.
I agree with you 100% on Hodges, but I throw in Minnie Minoso to that group of folks.
Well, Minnie belongs because he was the first, great, Latin star. That's you can have Minnie Minoso as well. But okay. So now I've got $7,500. I got $7,500, and I still have more players to see. But I'm telling Dinchecki who I've seen and what has happened and how excited I am. He gives me another $2,500. And among the people I'm able to interview are Ellie Howard, who was absolutely, fabulous. I went to Texas to interview Billy Martin, who was the manager of Texas at the time. And we had a wonderful, wonderful interview. And I saw Mickey Mantle at Yankee Stadium. Mickey had said for me to meet him in Texas at his home in Dallas, and I arrived in Dallas, and I called his home, and his wife said to me, "Mickey's in New York." So, hop on the plane, fly from Dallas to New York the next day, and there's Mickey in the clubhouse of Yankee Stadium. And I am not usually somebody who is shy. But for crying out loud, this was Mickey Mantle. This was my boyhood idol who I had loved since I was a little kid. And for the life of me, I just could not walk up to him and say hi. So what did I do? I went to the gentleman of the clubhouse, and that was Elston Howard, who I had interviewed for an hour or 2. And I said, "Ellie, do me a favor. I have to interview Mickey, but I'm just too shy to go up to him. Will you introduce me to him?" And he said, "Sure." And sure as shooting, the 2 of us walked over to Mickey, and Ellie said, "I want you to introduce Peter Golenbock. He's writing this book about the Yankees." And Mickey and I shook hands. And I said, "Mickey, would it be okay for me to interview you?" And he looked me in the eye, and he went, "No."
And then he was kidding.
Leaving me. Yeah, of course. He was absolutely kidding. He was, but he left me, with duty in my shorts. It was like, oh my God, I've come this far, and Mickey's saying no. But Of course, he said yes. And we talked in that clubhouse for more than an hour. And again, the things that he told me, he never told anybody else. It was the damnedest thing. I just sometimes I pinch myself wondering, why do these people tell me these things? Because he's telling me about the nightmares that he has. How he's standing. This is 1970.
Outside the stadium and can't get in,
yeah.
and he hears his name being announced.
Exactly.
You portrayed that so beautifully in the book.
Yeah.
I mean, that if one didn't love Mickey beforehand, if you were a Willie Mays guy, you had to love him. You had to love him.
You had to.
With his dad and his uncles having Hodgkin's disease.
Here was the greatest ball player of my generation, and I just wanted to give this guy a hug.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
And it was interesting because we were talking about his father, and he was telling me how in the 51 World Series, after he had stepped in that plug in the hole in the outfield, and he was on crutches going to the hospital, his father at the same time they were discovering he had Hodgkin's disease, and he was going to the hospital. He was going to the hospital too. And he said, the way I found out that my father was ill is that as I was stepping out of the car, I put all of my weight on my father's shoulders. And he put his weight on my shoulders as though I was his father. And it felt like a sledgehammer was pulling down on my shoulders. This was the strongest man on the face of this earth, believe me. And
but
he was no taller than I was.
His dad, before he got sick, was as strong as him.
Oh, no question about it. But what happened was when he did that, his father collapsed.
Yeah.
His father hadn't told anybody he was sick. And when Mickey put his strength down on his father's shoulders to help him get out of the car, his father collapsed. They both ended up in the hospital. Wow. So these were the last of the interviews, and Nick Dincheco had given me $10,000, and now I had to write this thing. And I wrote it, and it was 1,100 pages long. Whoa. The thing was 1,100 pages long. And
so it was edited. I'm sure there are things in the unedited version that we speaking collectively for crazies, would love to see. I wonder if your manuscripts or if you have a plan to.
Well, let me tell you the good news. So what Frank Coffey, my editor, did basically is he cut the book in half. And what he did is he took my lengthy interviews with people like Andy Carey and Jerry Lumpy and Eno Slaughter, the fellows who were not nearly as important as the most important people, and he cut them pretty much out, which I have to tell you really infuriated Gene Woodling, because when I saw him at an Old Timers Day, he looks at me and he goes, "What in the world did I spend all my time talking to you for?" And I felt like shit, if you want to know the truth. But I apologized profusely. I said the book was too long. I'm terribly sorry the editor edited you out. And I'm really, really sorry. But he didn't edit them out completely. It's just, Woodling talked to me for an hour, and he was magnificent. It's just that Prentice Hall did not want to publish an 1,100-page book. I mean, it was tough enough. They printed a 550-page book. Where, the original type size was so tiny you needed a friggin' magnifying glass to read the goddamn thing. But I'll tell you that the good news was, somewhere along the line, I found the original version of my first 250 pages. In the first book, the editor had taken out all the information about Larry McPhail and about George Weiss coming to the Yankees and about, the Yankees prior, how the team was founded, all of that stuff. It was about 150 pages that they took out. And there's, in today's version, the Dover Press edition of Dynasty, they agreed to put those first 250 pages in the way I originally wrote it.
Nice.
You find the Dover edition of Dynasty, and you'll find the first 250 pages of the way I wrote it, and you'll just love it.
Well, I know I would, because at this point in our lives, pretty much, thanks to you and Marty Pell and other Tom Meany, I wanted to ask you about him.
Oh,
did you know
sure.
him? And
I didn't know him, and I didn't know Frank Graham. I didn't know Frank Graham. I knew a lot of other people.
Both of whom wrote great books about the Yankees.
Well, I'll tell you something. When I was 12 years old, I was in the Stamford, Connecticut library, and I found the New York Yankees by Frank Graham. And I started reading it, and I was hooked. I was absolutely transfixed, because here was Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio. I think the thing was published in 1946. It went up to about 1946. And here were all these fabulous Yankees. Home Run Baker. I mean, you name it. And they were in this book. And I was just absolutely transfixed. And so that when I went to see Nick Dincheco, I said to him, look, Frank Graham wrote this fabulous book on the Yankees that was published in 1946. I want to write the sequel. And that was part of the proposal, to write the sequel.
Whoa.
Frank Graham's book.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. See, what I didn't understand, listen, what I didn't understand was the difference between Frank Graham and me was that Frank Graham had spent 20 years with the Yankees. I had spent 4 years in college and 3 years in law school.
But
so when I went to Yankees,
you had the information. You had.
I didn't have any information. I didn't have anything. I didn't realize it, but I didn't have any information. Frank Graham had the information because he lived with these people. He knew them. He was at all the ball games with them, for crying out loud. And so what I was going to do when I made the proposal to write Dynasty is I was going to take all these newspaper articles and I was going to write a book based on the newspaper articles until I sat down to do it.
Right.
And of course, at that point, I realized that, there's just no way. That the only way that I could write this book is if I went to see the ball players themselves. And I was fortunate because I was young, I was single, I had the time. I don't have time to spend 3 years to write a book anymore. Right.
Exactly. And the energy to spend.
Oh, I traveled 30. I figured it out. I traveled 33,000 miles, traveling around the country to see all these ball players. It was some trek. I mean, it was some. Bobby Richardson lived in Columbia, South Carolina. I'd never been to South Carolina. Well, actually, that's not true. I'd driven through there, but I'd never actually been there. And that was fun because Bobby Richardson had a ping pong table. And heck, I was a very good ping pong player. I said, Bobby, I challenge you to a game of ping pong. He says, well, sure, let's play. And he beat me 21-1. He was the boy champion of the state of South Carolina in ping pong. He beat me. And
you consider yourself a good ping pong player.
I am a very good ping pong player. That's right.
That's how great he was.
Oh, I know. I went
hand to eye.
Yeah.
Same kind of skills. Racket sports transcend to baseball. Quickness of the hands, and to boxing. Did you get into boxing at all as a kid? Or
no. My idea of getting my face
desire to write about it. Did you have a desire to write about it?
When I was in law school, I wrote for a news service, and I went to a lot of fights in Atlantic City.
Okay.
I was friends with one of the boxers. He's got the same name as the fellow who wrote Short People.
Oh, I know who you mean.
Anyhow, so I went to one of his fights.
But you leave your hat on. That's a better song than Short People by the.
But he had the same name as Short People. And I went to his fight, and he was fighting one of the brothers. Again, this was in the early 70s. Quarry. He was fighting Jerry Quarry. That's who he was fighting. And I'm sitting in the front row because I'm a friend of his, and I got, good seats. And Jerry Quarry proceeds to beat him about the head, and I'm covered with blood. I was absolutely covered with blood. Boxing is not a genteel sport.
No.
I had
go to a triple header championship at the Garden in about 1964 or 65. It was Emil Griffith.
64 and 65. I was in Hanover, New Hampshire, so no.
Oh, okay.
The only time I went to the Garden. The only time we went to the Garden during that period was for there was a holiday tournament. We played a holiday tournament at the Garden during Christmas, and I used to go because I was crazy for Bill Bradley, crazy to see the great LSU guard Pete Maravich, who was so fabulous, and I just adored watching these people play. And you could go to the Garden for a double header for $8. It's not like it is today.
No.
And all through law school, I spent a lot of time in law school at Madison Square Garden. Phil Jackson was a close friend of mine. We spent 3 years sitting at the various restaurants near the Garden drinking beer.
There's a wonderful book written about Phil Jackson and those years. Something about Miracle on 48th Street was the name of it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Do you remember that book? And I can't think of the writer, but
it's funny. I haven't read any of those books because I lived it. I spent most of that '73 season in New York with him, and so I was there for that championship. I was sitting there when Willis Reed came out for that last game, limping like crazy, hit the took the Knicks to victory. That was stupendous. It absolutely
compelling years. The deepness and skill of that team.
That was the closest. That was the closest the Knicks ever came to what the Celtics were.
Exactly.
They had the wonderful
they
coach.
Had Casey Jones coming in off the bench. We had guys
that's
like
the Celtics.
Reardon.
We had Mike Reardon. That's right.
Solid guys.
We had terrific guys.
And stalwart. I've said this on other podcasts in the last week or so. Both Kenny Sears and Dave Stallworth passed away within the last month.
Is that right? Kenny Sears was my first Knicks hero. It was Kenny Sears, and it was like Willie Knowles. He was one of the guards.
But unfortunately, with those two great forwards, or really good forwards, in Charlie Tyree and a host of other inept Paul Hogue-like centers.
Yeah, Paul Hogue was a mistake. I actually saw Paul Hogue play in a couple of, industrial league games. I think he was very, very good. He just was not good against Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell and those people.
Right.
He was a mistake.
Who was?
Walt Bellamy was a wonderful player.
I love Bellamy, and when they rebuilt, part of it was they brought in Reed, and there was no room for Bellamy. But Walter went to Detroit for DeBusschere with Comax.
That was the greatest trade in the history, literally in the history of the New York Knicks.
Absolutely.
Greatest trade. DeBusschere was a stunning individual. He was a superb athlete. He was actually a professional baseball player. He was a pitcher.
With the White Sox.
He could have played professional. Yeah, he could have played professional baseball had he not had such a love for basketball.
He did get into a few games with the White Sox, DeBusschere.
Yeah, no, he did. Sure. No, I know he did.
He could have gone
absolutely,
on.
But he didn't have a career. He didn't have a career.
But he was also was more than just basketball. He went on to be the commissioner of one of the ABL or AB.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. I know.
Very bright guy and fit in.
Very special guy. They were that Knicks team with DeBusschere and Bradley and Willis and Earl Monroe.
Right.
And the great player from the other guard who was
Baltimore
stunningly great,
and Winston
Walt Frazier.
I think Frazier from Illinois. He was Southern Illinois.
Southern Illinois. Frazier was from Southern Illinois, and yes, that's exactly right.
And this
is a very
that Frazier and Monroe could play as well together with just one basketball, folks.
Yep.
Because that was the big surprise. And Jerry Lucas came in for the
Lucas came, and Lucas was stunning. Lucas was absolutely stunning.
As good a passer as any NBA player ever.
And Bradley
NBA
too.
Center.
That's
ever.
right.
He
don't forget the Knicks had a guard. He was from one of the African American schools. He shot left-handed. He leaned back when he took his shot. He was one of the first. Thank you. Dick Barnett.
Okay.
Absolutely right. I mean, these people
Fall back,
were
baby,
fabulous.
you would scream.
Fabulous ball players. And after 1973, and this is now 2017, the last time the Knicks were relevant were the month that Jeremy Lin played for the Knicks.
Right.
Of course, what did the Knicks do?
Kid from out here, from
Harvard. From Harvard.
Asian kid. Yeah.
Yeah. The Asian
and
kid
now
from Harvard.
He's with the Nets, and I read an article about him. He's seeing life as it really is. Anybody, I won't go into it. But
let's put it this way. When he was with the Knicks for that period of time, he was stunning. He took a crappy team and made them relevant again. And, of course, the Knicks being the Knicks, instead of, trading away anybody else, they traded him away, which was just a shame.
Absolutely. And there were the Patrick years that just happened to coincide with Jordan and his greatness.
That's right.
Because there were some games in the early 90s that, or maybe the mid-90s, now that I think about it, where, boy, those Knicks teams played Chicago awfully tough. And, it was, so it wasn't all bad. But,
no, right.
But, yeah, it's not been easy over the years. Hey, how about this as a Met fan? Syndergaard gets hurt today, and not only that, they give up 14 runs to Washington, and he joins Canseco or Cespedes and a host of others, Mats on the DL.
Well, my Knicks fans are suffering. Knicks fans. My Mets fans are suffering.
Absolutely.
Don't forget, too, Washington lost Adam Eaton. So they're suffering a little bit themselves.
Okay, I'm looking at the time. We don't have much time. I'm going to ask you a question that I really need to know. Any given Sunday, the Yankees come in to Tampa to play. Who do you root for? You're sitting there.
I root for the Rays. You got to be kidding me. This ballpark is 7 minutes from my home. I've rooted for this team since 1998.
But when you look at those pinstripes, or in this case, that classic road gray uniform with the New York, same New York as the Mick-War, do you sometimes in the middle of a game kind of go, well,
No, I've lived in this town since 1990. You know how many years that is? 1990 to 2017? It's a long time.
Yeah. Well,
this is my town.
In Northern California since 1966, and
holy
I still think of the New York Giants. I still think of the San Francisco Giants when I'm out there as the New York Giants. And when
Sure.
they happen to be playing the Mets, whom I worship,
Right.
I still have kind of which son, the prodigal son or the son you grew, that replaced the.
Well, what's interesting too is that I've played, rotisserie baseball since 1983, and I've had this team since 1983, where you pick, 14 hitters and 10 pitchers.
Yeah, we did a great show about that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, well, that takes the edge off of it a little bit, because I can have a couple of Yankees on my team and a couple of Orioles on my team, and and you root for the players who are on your team.
Right.
So what I end up doing is rooting for the Rays to win that day and root for my players.
Right.
So I can root for the Yankees a little bit.
We talk about this one thing, my little thing about Rotary League. If you could get your home team, the team you're rooting for, get the closer on that team, makes Rotisserie League a little easier. Having the closer.
You can't. It all depends on the prices. You don't want to overpay for anybody. So in the beginning of the draft, if some closer came up,
you have trades.
Yeah, nobody trades. Nobody trades. You keep the guys you got for the most part. Some people trade. I'm not much of a trader because I'm a lousy trader. So
what if you have an injury and you have to fill a position?
Mostly you suck wind, because if you trade, then you're weakening something else.
True.
But nobody's got a surplus. At least not usually. I mean, every once in a while you get lucky and find some guy who you picked for your bullpen ends up being the closer. So you might have, three guys who are getting saves. So you can try to save trade one of them off to get some steals, or trade one of them off to get some wins from a starting pitcher. You can do that every once in a while, but not very often.
Right. Well, it does make it very interesting if somebody says, well, how did you do today, baseball-wise? And you have to take a deep breath. Well, my pitching did well, and I got some homers, got a stolen base here and there. Nothing is absolute.
Before we go, let me real quick get on here. Hold on. Let me I go on here to my onroto.com. I'll hit my team, the Vex. There it is, the Vex. Hit live scoring, my team, to find out that Miguel Gonzalez pitched 6 innings, gave up 14 hits and 6 earned runs, absolutely friggin' killing me, to find out that my team, Correa got 2 hits, Ricard got 2 hits, Kendry Morales got 2 hits, and Poof and Alcides Escobar each got 1. My boys went 8 for 29 with no home runs and 2 RBIs, sinking me deeper and deeper. But it's April.
Well, let me give you the epitome, Peter, of playing Rotisserie League. Matt Wieters, my catcher, went 2 for 4 with 2 homers and 4 ribbies. And
that's when you know how smart you are. That's when you know I'm a really smart person. And, of course, Wieters didn't have the 2 home runs and the 4 ribbies.
Right.
You did.
Oh, yeah, it was me. I drafted him.
It was you. That's it.
I drafted him.
Right.
But I also drafted Marte, the Pittsburgh outfielder who got busted for dope. So
well, then you know what you do?
That was his fault.
You know what you do then? You sit shiver.
My fault.
That's what you do. You go and sit shiver.
Right.
That's it.
We won't have to sit shiver for this show because this was terrific. Thank you, Peter. Same
My
time,
pleasure.
same bat station. And next
All right. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks. It's fun. Enjoy it. Bye, everybody. It was great.